Hello, Year 6, and welcome to today's story time. I'm going to be reading a chapter from The Explorer, and pay close attention because the question of the day is going to be a question about this chapter. Let me remind you what's happened so far in this book. So the main character is Fred, and there is Leela and her little brother Max, and there is Con, a blonde girl who seems to be very rude to Fred. They all crashed and landed in a plane in the Amazon rainforest, and they have found a den. They're scared because they don't know whether someone is coming back to the den. They have trekked along to the river and found bathed in the river there, and now they've gone back to their camp in the den, and they are going to make a fire. So let me read to you from the chapter called Fire. The grubs, when mixed with the cocoa beans and pounded with a clean stick, turned into a paste which, if you squinted and were of an optimistic temperament, looked like flour and water. Now we just make a fire and cook them, said Fred. Just, said Con. We need a flint, said Fred. We need kindling, said Leela. And matches, said Con. I'll do the kindling, said Fred. Most of the wood surrounding them had dried since the rain the night before. He held the hem of his cricket jumper in his teeth and made a hammock for the wood. The night in the jungle had not improved the taste of the wool. He came back to the clearing and took the wood into a pile, a few paces away from the den. There were flints in there, said Leela. We could rub away the moss and use them to make a spark. Flints don't go off. Flints aren't enough by themselves, said Fred. I've tried. You need a bit of steel. Leela ducked into the den to fetch the flint. Con was staring at Fred's watch. What's that made of? Fred stared down at the watch, covering it protectively with his hand. Glass. And steel, he said. My father gave it to me when I went to boarding school. But it's broken, said Con. I know that, he said. So, said Con, if it's broken, it's not really a watch anymore, is it? But what it is a lump of steel. Fred jerked his hand back. His father never bought his birthday gift. He left it to his secretary to take Fred to Harrods and pick out something sensible. This was the only gift Fred could remember his father choosing himself. He had had it engraved with Fred's initials. Leela nodded. It might be the only way, she said. Her voice had sympathy in it, but grit too. Fine, said Fred. He had an unaccountable, absurd need to cry. Fine, we'll use it. Can I have first try? Asked Con. It's my watch. I know, but I've never lit a fire before, she said. Not even the ones in the fireplace at home. Not even on bonfire night? Fred asked. Not allowed. There was longing and hunger in her eyes. She looked away from him, turning the flint over and over in her hand as if it were a jewel. But there was something written in her face, Fred thought, something in a code he couldn't begin to read. Here. Slowly he undid the strap. He held the watch in his fist, surreptitiously tracing the letters on the back with his thumb. Con watched in silence. He put it in her palm. I get a second go. Leela heaped shredded leaves and dried grass in a pile. You do it over that, she said, so the spark has something to catch. Con struck the back of the watch against the stone. Fred winced. She overshot and dug the flint into her own skin. She said nothing and tried again. She bit down her tongue, concentrating, her eyebrows furrowed so deeply they nudged against her eyelashes, striking and striking until her fingers were raw. Suddenly, flint and steel let off a tiny spark. Con was so stunned, she fumbled the flint. Again, shrieked Max. Again! The spark came again, a brief flare into the world that vanished as it came. It needs to be lower over the kindling, said Leela. Con struck again and again. The spark caught against a blade of grass, which caught against another. Fred's heart leapt and he dropped to his stomach and blew on the scrap of a fire, terrified he would blow it right out. The flame faltered. No, no, don't die, said Con. Leela added a handful of dry moss. Fred blew again. The fire seemed to breathe in and then exhaled a cough of flames. Max whooped. Leela held out a sheaf of twigs. The fire caught at them, made 5 burning fingers, ate them whole. It belched upwards. More, said Max. He was dancing in a tight circle, slapping at his ribs. Feed it more. Fred added a handful of bone-dry leaves and then another and another. The fire made a noise like an idea being born, a crackle that sounded like hope and sent up a column of flames. They all rocked back on their ankles, grinning at each other. We could sleep in shifts, said Con, to make sure it doesn't go out. She looked at the fire with proprietorial pride. We made that by ourselves. Fred put the watch quietly in his pocket. It was scratched now and deeply dented, but inside his pocket he clutched it so tightly it dug in a circular bruise in his palm. It's the most beautiful fire I've ever seen, said Leela. Yes, said Con, by far. Max bit lightly at Leela's arm. Can we eat now? I'm so hungry I might die. Fred scrambled in the dust with his nails until he found a flat stone and balanced it, wobbling dangerously on 4 green wood sticks over the center of the flames. Leela divided the grub paste into 4 balls and spread them on the stone. Eventually the pancakes began to bubble. Leela poked them. They're getting harder, she said. And they smell like a shoe, said Con. That probably means they're done. One of the trees near the den had vast fleshy leaves, as big as serving dishes. Fred pulled 4 of them down and dropped a grub pancake onto each one. They were hot to the touch and gooey. They're probably best while they're so hot you can't taste them, said Fred. He bit off half the pancake, trying not to chew much. It tasted disconcertingly animal. It was, he thought, like eating porridge mixed with fingernail grime, but it was better, wildly, infinitely better than nothing. You can tell they're really hungry. Con nibbled the corners of hers. She grimaced, but she didn't spit it out. To be honest, it's not that much worse than school dinners, she said, and she smiled, half a smile. Max kept his food scrunched in his fist, guarding it from the others. I don't like sharing, he said. His pancake oozed from between his fingers. The clearing was growing darker every minute. Con stood. I'm going to go and use the, she hesitated and coloured, lavatory, so don't come over there or look around or I'll punch you. She paused. Please. We could decide on a place, said Fred, quite far off, and then we could mark a path and nobody would get lost. They got up, all 4 of them standing close together in the gathering dark, and began looking for a suitably large, large enough tree, far enough from the fire, but not far enough away to risk getting lost. This one's big, said Fred. And this one, said Con. The trees were immense, stretching out at least as far as the church. We could make that one the boys' toilet and this one girls, said Con. Leela's smile was sudden and enormous. It showed that one of her teeth was wonky and she had a dimple on her cheek. We could call it the lavatory. It wasn't terribly funny, but once Fred started laughing, he couldn't stop. Con choked and had to bite her fist. Max's laughter sent a ribbon of stock flying across the glade. They laughed loudly, enough to scare the birds and to make the distant monkeys roar angrily from their night perches in the trees. So, that is one chapter, and I hope you've enjoyed it, Year 6.